cold Chicago wind pushed against Ethan Cole's jacket as he stood outside the towering glass building of Cole Dynamics, the empire his father built. Everyone who passed through those revolving doors saw success, money, and reputation. Ethan saw a cage. For years, he'd been groomed to take over the company, private tutors, Ivy League degree, luxury penthouse, every privilege imaginable. Yet the more his father tried to hand him everything, the emptier he felt. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped believing anyone could love him for himself. That thought haunted him the most. The decision. Ethan had watched employees walk past the security guards 1,000 times, barely offering a nod. They were invisible people, the kind who saw everything, but were seen by no one. One night, sitting in his car overlooking the glittering skyline, he made a reckless decision. He would become invisible. He called his friend Ben Torres, head of the company's internal security team. Ben, I need a favor. Hire me as one of your guards. Don't use my name. Don't tell anyone who I am. Ben thought he was joking until he saw the look in Ethan's eyes. You're serious. Dead serious. I just need a few months. I want to know what people are like when they think I'm nobody. Ben hesitated, but agreed. A week later, Ethan Cole, heir to a multi-billion-dollar corporation, started working the night shift at the very building that bore his family name, under the alias Ethan Gray. Across from Cole Dynamics stood a small corner cafe called Harbor Grounds. The owner, Grace Miller, opened every morning at 6 sharp, rain or shine. She built the shop from scratch after losing her husband in a construction accident 3 years earlier. Raising her 6-year-old son, Liam, alone had taught her resilience, but also left her wary of promises. The first morning Ethan came in wearing his security uniform. Grace assumed he was just another overworked guard grabbing caffeine before his shift. He ordered black coffee and a blueberry muffin. Rough night? She asked with a tired smile. You could say that, he replied. Something about his calm voice made her pause. He didn't talk like the others. There was a quiet dignity behind the exhaustion in his eyes. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a regular. He'd stop by after his shift, sometimes helping her carry in boxes of supplies before dawn. Grace found herself looking forward to those moments more than she cared to admit. 2 worlds collide. Inside Cole Dynamics, Ethan blended easily. He listened as employees whispered about the heir, the rich kid who'd never worked a real day in his life. He bit his tongue, guarding his identity behind the dull gray uniform. At night, Grace's shop became his refuge. They talked about everything: music, childhood dreams, the struggle of keeping hope alive. She told him about Liam's love for airplanes and her fear of failing as a mom. He told her vague stories about a father who never listened. Sounds like your old man's tough, she said once. Tough is one word for it, he replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Grace laughed. At least you're honest about it. Most people just pretend everything's fine. Ethan admired her blunt honesty. No pretense, no agenda. For the first time, he felt seen. The pressure builds. Meanwhile, Richard Cole was furious. "You've been avoiding board meetings, Ethan," he barked over the phone one afternoon. "Your absence is becoming an embarrassment. I told you I'm handling something important," Ethan replied. "Important? You're hiding. You can't learn business from a janitor's closet." Ethan hung up without answering. For the first time, his father's words didn't sting. They just sounded hollow. Ben warned him the disguise couldn't last forever. "You're playing with fire, man. If your dad finds out—" "He will," Ethan interrupted. "But not yet." Winter crept in, and Grace's old coffee machine broke down. When Ethan heard her on the phone trying to negotiate a used replacement, he quietly transferred money to the seller and told them an anonymous donor had already paid. The next morning, Grace burst into tears when she learned the good news. "Someone out there still believes in kindness," she said. Ethan just smiled and took his coffee to go. Liam grew attached to him too. The boy would sit on the counter drawing pictures of airplanes while Ethan listened patiently. "When I grow up, I'm gonna fly to the moon," Liam declared one morning. "Then promise me you'll wave when you pass over Chicago," Ethan said. Grace rolled her eyes affectionately. "You two sound like dreamers." "That's the only kind worth being," Ethan replied. Rumors started circulating at Cole Dynamics. A new security guy had been spotted speaking privately with senior managers, even calming down an irate investor once. His poise was too polished, his speech too educated. People whispered he wasn't who he claimed to be. One night, Ethan stayed late to cover an extra shift. Grace brought him a thermos of soup because, in her words, "You look like you haven't eaten anything real in days." They sat in the empty lobby, sharing stories under the glow of the security monitors. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" she asked quietly. He froze. "Every single day," he answered. The next morning, Richard Cole stormed into the building unannounced. The board had told him about a mystery guard who seemed unusually familiar. He demanded an explanation. When Ethan walked into the executive wing in his uniform, his father's eyes widened in disbelief. "Ethan." The room fell silent. Cameras clicked, secret exposed. "So this is where you've been hiding, playing dress-up with the janitors." "Working with them," Ethan corrected softly. "You should try it sometime." Richard turned crimson. "Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation?" "Maybe fix it," Ethan said, before walking out. News traveled fast. By the next morning, Grace heard whispers from customers about a billionaire heir who pretended to be a guard. Her hands trembled as she searched his name online. There it was, his face, his story, everything he'd never told her. When Ethan walked into the cafe later that day, She was waiting behind the counter, eyes full of disbelief. "Ethan Cole," she said flatly. "That's your real name, isn't it?" He nodded. "I wanted to tell you. When, before or after I started trusting you?" Liam peeked from behind the counter. "Mom." Grace forced a smile for her son, then looked back at Ethan. "You lied to me, to him." "I lied about my name, not about how I feel." "You think that makes it better?" He didn't answer. The silence between them was heavier than any accusation. Days turned into weeks. The media storm faded, but the damage remained. Grace avoided his calls. Richard tried to spin the incident as a social experiment for publicity, which only made Ethan feel worse. One evening, Ethan found himself standing outside harbor grounds again. Through the window, he saw Grace helping Liam with homework, the warmth of their small world glowing against the snow. He didn't go in. He just stood there, unseen, again the invisible man he had chosen to become. Ben's car pulled up beside him. "You're gonna freeze out here," Ben said. "I just wanted to make sure they're okay. You could at least talk to her." Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. She deserves honesty, not another story." Ben sighed. "So what now? Go back to being a billionaire?" "No," Ethan said softly. "Go back to being human." Months later, Coal Dynamics announced a new community initiative funding small local businesses. The first recipient, Harbor Grounds Coffee. Grace never knew who nominated her. One spring morning, a small box arrived at her shop. Inside was a worn security badge with a note. "Thank you for seeing me before the world did." She stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to smile or cry. Outside, the wind carried the faint hum of traffic, ordinary and endless. Somewhere in the city, Ethan Cole watched the sunrise, wondering if love lost through truth could ever be found again. The world moved on, but neither of them would ever see ordinary people the same way again. And perhaps that was the point all along.